All right.
All
Thanks
right.
for coming on to talk to me, Jade. It's an absolute pleasure. It's our second podcast together now. We did our first one about a year or two ago. And it's very exciting to hear that you've got a new course coming out called the Multi-Orgasmic Toolkit. And what a brilliant thing to be able to provide for people, right? To be able to experience more pleasure in sex. We all love sex. I'd say for most of us, the best part of sex is the orgasm. So why not put some time and effort into increasing our orgasmic states and bringing more pleasure into our lives and into our relationships? So yeah, thanks for thanks for all that work that you do for people. For those who haven't heard about you or know what it is you do, can you just give us a little introduction about what it is you do and what it is you offer?
Sure. So my name is Jade Lotus, and I'm a life, sexuality, and longevity coach. So specifically, I focus on using sexual energy to achieve a heightened experience of existence that goes into every part of your life. So it's increased vitality, increased health, increased energy, increased creativity, and of course, increased pleasure as well is a really, really important part of it. So essentially this course you've just mentioned, so it's kind of been in the works for a little while, so to speak, and it's been something that I've been, it's like really my passion coming out to create this. So just to explain a little bit about myself and my background. So my background is in, originally it's in law, which quite quickly bored me. I realized it wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. And I then ended up doing another degree in Chinese medicine and finding out about Chinese philosophy, Chinese culture, Chinese practices, Chinese systems of medicine. And what I found out that was absolutely the most fascinating thing in there was Chinese sexology. So I discovered that in China, there was an ancient system of sexology that's literally gone back thousands of years. And of course, we think sex, we think pleasure, and absolutely sex is about pleasure. But as Western people, we tend to view pleasure on a very narrow bandwidth. We think of an orgasm. People usually say an orgasm. Well, in Chinese sexology, the response to that would be like, why limit to one orgasm? Almost like you're talking about an anticlimax there, So instead of saying an orgasm, the Chinese system, which we can call the Taoist system of sexology, it would talk about orgasmic energy. So orgasmic energy essentially is our life force. It's the energy that originates in our perineum between our legs. And what the energy naturally then does is it rises up the body, and essentially it nourishes the whole body. So if you look at the meridian system of acupuncture, you can see there's meridians coming up the body, and then out of that comes 12 meridians, which nourish our 12 organs and the limbs and so on. Okay, but the beginning point of that energy is the sexual energy. Now, of course, as much as we think of sex perhaps in a pornographic way, we understand that that sexual energy is the source of life. It creates new life. After all, we cannot deny this, And in the same way, sexual energy is the life force within our body. And sure, an average person, how many children are you going to have? Even 3 children, 4 children is a lot of children. How many times does a woman ovulate and never produce a child? How many times does a man ejaculate, producing millions of sperm, and most of those sperms go to waste? So the ancient Chinese, essentially, they figured out a system of harnessing that sexual energy to be able to use it to heal our body, to have increased energy, to be more creative, and you can even use it to achieve enlightenment. In fact, you can use it for anything. It's referred to as a superfood for the soul by the ancient Taoists, actually, because it literally is just something you can turn into anything. And this is what orgasmic energy does. So the orgasmic energy, as I mentioned, it naturally rises up our body, keeps us healthy, and keeps us feeling fantastic and great and good. Okay, so when we get on to now looking at the average Western experience of sex, which is likely to be a kind of desperate chasing of an ejaculation or an orgasm, needing to perhaps watch more and more extreme porn, engage in polyamory or kinks and so on, because people are just looking for more thrills and more thrills because they're not feeling satisfied. And what so many clients complain to me about, essentially, it's numbness, that they're not feeling in their body, they're not feeling much in their organs, in their sexual organs, they're not feeling much in their orgasms as well. And what's actually happened in Western culture. Now, an interesting thing to note about Chinese culture, which is a big thing that's a huge difference between Chinese culture and our culture, is traditionally there's never really been an idea that sex is somehow dirty or that it's somehow sinful or moralistic. The idea is that sex is this vital life force, and there isn't the same kind of, even we say, oh, dirty, as if it's kind of like a positive thing about sex, for example, how to talk dirty, how to get dirty, and so on. There just isn't that ideology, which means that people can kind of just look at sex as it is and experience it for what it is. And this is something I really learned, especially when I was studying and learning from the Taoist Grandmaster Mantak Chia, and this is an elderly man, almost 80 years old, and I've seen him talk to a whole crowd for about 2 hours, just describing how to touch inside the vagina with your fingers, how to lick it, he's going like this, but there's nothing like seedy about it. There's nothing like that you listen to it and you're like, ha ha ha, or anything like that. You're just like, oh, wow, someone's actually talking about how to do it. And this makes sense. And for him, there's no sense of shame about sexual energy. If you look at his videos on YouTube, he'll be like, okay, female ejaculation, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's not a big thing. It's just the same as describing, okay, if you're going to surf, you've got to get on the board, you've got to do X, Y, Z. You want to make a cake, you put the eggs and the flour together or whatever. It just is what it is, Whereas to us Westerners, there's so much baggage around sexuality, And if we look right from the beginning, a young child, when they start touching their sexual organs, experiencing sexual energy, they're very likely to essentially be shamed for their sexuality. Because of course, we as parents, we're seeing the budding sexuality, which can start 2, 3, 4 years old, is when the first sort of hormones start kicking in the child, and we get scared of pedophiles, we get scared of, social shaming and so on. We then shame the child. The child is starting to feel this life force energy growing and moving up his body. What we actually do is we tell the child, block up, tense up, shut down that sexual energy, and the feelings of shame that we give to the child go to live just above their pubic bone, and they block the meridian. So they start to block the meridian from bringing the energy up. So obviously some energy will still be moving, but it really affects, interestingly enough, when you see kids sitting and they're kind of wriggling, and the parents are like, stop wriggling. Well, they're actually trying to unblock that energy. And they kind of know, oh, okay, there's Taoist exercises where we kind of wriggle and unblock the energy as well, and the child knows, but again and again, we put on them, it's shameful, the child asks, how does sex happen? We don't want to talk about it. We hide it from them. Perhaps when they're a little older and they start seeing a girlfriend, we then shame them even more. We tell them they aren't allowed to bring the girlfriend back to the house, more and more negative energy. Then perhaps, the natural relationship of orgasmic energy is to rise up into the heart and connect with love. But for example, when we have a child right from the beginning that they're not actually experiencing very much cuddling from their mother, it's kind of shutting the whole heart down. And when they get a little older, they maybe have experience with partners and it's negative and it shuts their heart down even more. So what we end up with, and this is a specific thing to Westernized culture, we have emotion on top of emotion on top of emotion, filling up the abdomen, filling up the chest, filling up the groin, and just blocking up this meridian. And the results of this is that basically the sexual energy shuts down. So the classic symptoms we're going to see in men, number one, is going to be premature ejaculation, okay? ED comes somewhere along with this, okay, when that problem is then exacerbated by porn use, yeah? So people talk about, okay, there's watching an image of, people having sex, then there's getting addicted to porn, which is a very common thing, okay? But you're only going to get addicted to porn if there's already some kind of underlying blockage and imbalance. But then what the porn's going to do is it's going to amplify and intensify that whole blockage, because porn is very much about going into this kind of like embarrassing, sort of shameful space and just building up on that shame. Most people, they don't want someone to know about it. They don't want to talk about it. Often they're watching more and more and more seedy things, which is in some weird way, like causing stimulation by building up on this shame that's been established in childhood, essentially, then there comes with that like just a shutdown of the sensation of orgasm, the sensation of pleasure. For example, you know, naturally when our energy body is flowing, one simply needs to just go like this on the sexual organ to have a multiple orgasm come up, whether you're a male or a female. So that's an orgasm for males, which does not involve ejaculation. Okay, so but most men are reduced to grabbing very hard on their penis, jerking very, very hard. You know, some of these men will then not even really feel anything inside a vagina because they're jerking so hard, combined with bad sexual technique, of course, you know, and just one on top of the other. But it's not just the sexual that's affected. Because the energy is blocked, it's going to have an effect on the kidneys. You know, the first sign, it's going to be lower back pain, you know, symptoms around the lower body, you know, discomfort, lumps and bumps around the groin. Often you touch there and it kind of feels uncomfortable. It feels unpleasant, you know. Then because the heart is getting shut down and it's not getting the energy that it needs, it can literally lead to heart problems as well, you know. And plus there's just a cutoff because we're not receiving our most important supply of energy. There's just then like a kind of a cutoff from, you know, the ability to be creative, the ability to have inspiration and so on, you know, and we just end up kind of shut off, cut down, unable to focus. So people will often find, you know, like sometimes I have, when people message me asking for help, for example, I might get a few questions, then the person's telling me, oh, I find you so attractive, but they've already told me they're in a relationship. Then it's like, hang on, then it just turns out they can't even focus their energy to connect with their partner because it's all just such a mess and so disintegrated. So they're projecting it onto me, they're projecting it onto the next woman, they're projecting it onto porn. And of course, if you can't focus onto your beloved, how are you going to focus on your work? How are you going to focus on what you're doing? You know, it's just something that's going to affect every part of your life, you know. And then, for example, substance abuse, alcoholism, and so on. Absolutely, it's the same as porn addiction. If that energy is nicely flowing, it's not going to have, you know, it's not going to have an appeal to you. Essentially, you know, you're not going to want to, for example, abuse cannabis, abuse alcohol, and so on if your sexual energy is flowing. So, you know, everything is interconnected. And I mean, it's quite amazing and miraculous. And one thing I sometimes wonder about, you know, it's conventional religion has told us, you know, sex is kind of this shameful thing. We should hide it away. But for me, the more I discovered about sex, and especially through the Taoist practices, what I found out about sex, I just realized, man, you know, this is proof that there is like a divine hand in our creation. The fact that we're so intelligently created, that we have this amazing sexual energy, which gives us pleasure, that feeling of pleasure is what guides us, and it's what tells us what's right. The problem is we've fallen into this egoistic culture which tells us to repress emotions, repress sexuality, and that amazing, beautiful natural system has just shut down.
Wow, there's a lot there. So your course, thanks for that. Your course is for men and women, right? So
yeah, so some of the content is the same, some of the content is different. The fact is, you know, we have different sexual organs. You know, obviously, if people are transgender, they may find they're adapting the practices. For example, I mean, interestingly enough, in Taoism, we all have the sexual organs of both male and female, but for example, on an energetic level. So myself, I would say I have an energetic penis, and certainly I do at times meditate with my energetic penis. Yeah. And then find that that essentially I can tap into divine masculine energy with this. So for example, when people are transgender, now if they have had an operation, then they can work with the physical structure that's there. If they have the original genitals, maybe they're going to want to work with those, plus with the energetic structure. But generally, when we look at males and females in terms of sexual organs, you know, we're working there with the physical as they exist. Yeah. But we can also tap into that energetic, and it can definitely help also with relating to the opposite sex. If a man just meditates feeling an energetic uterus, and for the woman to meditate feeling an energetic penis as well. So because some of the exercises, they may involve massaging the breasts, massaging the ovaries, massaging the testicles. So obviously what's there is there, and you work with it.
Right. I definitely noticed the masculine energy in you as you go about creating your business. You really have that kind of penetrating energy, and you're really putting in a lot of work, aren't you, and towards creating these online courses and putting your work out there.
I was always a tomboy.
But yeah.
First of all, I was always a tomboy, and I got in terrible trouble as a kid because my background is quite conservative, for wanting to wear trousers and climb up trees. I remember I used to climb up trees and they were like, you can't do that. The boys can look up your skirt. And I'm like, trousers. No, you can't wear trousers. They might see your butt, And it's been partly my personality, but I have to say, and I mean, I'm going to just say here, Dan, look, sometimes what someone says is masculine and what someone says is feminine is based on outdated gender stereotypes. When you look at the animal kingdom, and for example, you look at a lioness, a tigress, these are vicious creatures. If one goes after you, you're going to be finished, because how are offspring going to survive, without a tough mum, But I agree, the masculine and feminine energies, they are different energies. But and I do admit, yes, I use masculine energy for sure. I also use feminine energy, but I will just say, if it was not for the Tao practices, because I spend a lot of time working on what I do, I put a lot of energy in. I'm very creative. I have to use my brain a lot, use my body and my intuition a lot. And were it not for the Taoist practices, so these same multi-orgasmic practices where you learn to tap into your sexual energy and use it for whatever you're using it for, there's no way I would have energy to do this without those practices. So in many ways, I mean, the Taoist practices are extremely empowering to women, because there's not, whilst our femininity is honored, at the same time, there's not the stereotype that women should be weak and so on. This is not, this is not something that's within Taoism. It's rather that women are respected as being very, very powerful, energetic beings. So, yeah, no, it's an interesting point, and you're right. But I have, my personality has always been a little bit of a way anyways, Dan, and I've always, when I grew up, became a teenager, I was always one of the lads doing the stuff with the guys, getting into extreme sports, wanting to compete with the guys, not the women, but, it's a personality type, isn't it? So.
And we all have masculine and feminine energy within us, right? So it's not necessarily defined by gender. In my coaching, a lot of work is creating more of a grounded masculine presence, but also being more connected to the heart and our emotions, which is more feminine energy, right? And so both men and women can embody the two.
Yeah, well, the feminine energy is the grounding energy, and the feminine energy grounds the masculine. So if you look at a healthy society, it needs strong women to ground the men. Now, if you look at our society, where the men have more control over the society, and you can see things like, for example, 95% of crime is caused by males. Okay, they say, huge amounts of violence, 98% or so of violence caused by males here. Now, the problem there is the women and the female energy is not strong enough to ground the masculine energy. And interestingly enough, if you look at premature ejaculation, this is the same thing. The female energy, both within the man and outside the man with the partner, it needs to ground that energy in. And for example, a gay man can be completely not having any female partners and not having premature ejaculation, but that's because he's grounded in on his own feminine energy. So the female energy, it holds and it grounds, whereas the male energy, according to the Tao, is the energy of action. So the two, we need to balance them. And within ourselves as individuals, I mean, you have a nice, as well as having a nice masculine energy, you also have a nice feminine Dan, a nice, comfortable, grounded energy as well. So, yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. I've always seen it differently to that. To me, the grounded energy was the masculine, because to me, my understanding is the masculine's grounded, the solid presence, the consciousness, and the feminine is the receptivity, the movement, the flow.
So this is interesting, because in Tantra, they talk about the Shakti energy being the life force energy that gives life to everything. And there's a few interesting articles about this. I've written about this on One Time. So it does appear to say the feminine. So we think of yin as the feminine, yang as the masculine. So the feminine is the holding energy. The yang is the energy of movement. Now, I don't think that these in Tantra and Taoism is necessarily like contradictory. I think it's describing the same thing, but perhaps something is lost in translation. But for example, if you get a whole group of men together, right? Yeah. I mean, for example, I've been in Arab countries where I've suddenly ended up somewhere around sunset, and there's a lot of men around, all shouting in a language that I don't understand, the energy going, and I've been really quite frightened because it's all just flying out of control. Whereas when the females are there with the males, it calms the energy down, you know? It's not that, obviously there are men's groups that are very calm, and if there's the conscious intention to tapping into that calm energy. But if you look at anything where there's a lot of males, the energy tends to kind of just rise up and go out of control quite easily, you know? But then obviously there is an active part to the feminine, you know? The female, for example, you know, I think one of the big problems actually with our society is women not giving foreplay to men. It's the cause of premature ejaculation. It's also the cause, I think, of a lot of male crime, that males actually need to be controlled by the female to some extent sexually in order for them to be balanced. So it all, interestingly enough, it all plays in together there.
Yeah, cool. So what I thought would be good if we could just talk about men for a bit, and then we'll move on to women.
Let's do that.
So it was very interesting. You were telling me about, so from what I'm hearing, it's our shame and other suppressed emotions that are actually getting in the way of us experiencing multiple orgasms, or being able to experience orgasmic energy, not just centered around our groin area, but we have the ability to bring that energy up and experience that pleasure all over our body, right? But it would appear...
So the main blockage is just above the pubic bone, and that is where shame and guilt tend to go and reside. So that's when you get bumps around that pubic area, discomfort, swelling, and so on. Okay. Cool. Another very, very common blockage is just under the heart, and that's the fear of love. And plus in the abdomen, you can have all kinds of different emotions, including like performance anxiety kind of building up there. So yeah, it can get blocked all along the way, but I kind of see shame and guilt as the kind of number one culprit.
So I've been practicing semen retention, so I haven't ejaculated for about 2 weeks now, and I'm experiencing quite a lot of the symptoms that you talked about, specifically the lower back pain, and also I'm experiencing a lot of tightness around the perineum area. So there's actually a lot of discomfort. I've been feeling it for the last few days now. Now I understand that it's because the energy isn't flowing. So I've been doing a lot of yoga, I've been doing a lot of movement and qigong, but it still seems to be quite stuck. And so I'm on the right path here. So I'm starting to be introduced to the blocks that are preventing my energy from rising.
Absolutely. So now you're starting to feel them. And I just would say, I would be careful with this, because you don't want to overwhelm your body. You know, you're not going to help your body out if you overwhelm. So it's better, for example, if someone was masturbating to porn every day, 3 times a day, and they cut down to once a day, then they're having some kind of a buildup of energy. But you need to be careful, because if you build it up too much, but it's not flowing and it's not transforming and transmuting, you can end up causing yourself problems. And this especially is the case for men that then are doing perineum squeezing. It's going to really, really exacerbate the problem. And what most guys who are practicing semen retention, the place they don't want to go is the place that they need to go. And that place is their emotions, you know? So I would say, I mean, there's nothing, sure, I think yoga does have a transformative effect, you know? I think, unfortunately, it's something that was adapted to people quite different from us a very long time ago, that were living a very different lifestyle from us, you know. Qigong, it definitely can help, but I just haven't found anything close to the Taoist inner and sexual alchemy techniques practiced in the correct order under an instructor. So definitely don't go find, you know, I know you wouldn't do this, but some people will find a YouTube video and really cause themselves injuries by copying things on YouTube videos. So yeah, so it's something that I think is what's very, very important is to practice getting into a relationship with your body. You know, I know you can go on these Instagrams where so-and-so is going, oh, I did 35 days. And you're like, oh my God, I've only done 2 weeks and I need to ejaculate. But if your body is saying you need to ejaculate, you're better off to, you know, only have shorter gaps, but transform the energy rather than force something, because this can just block up the energy even more. And the really important thing is that those emotions are being dealt with.
Right. Okay. So how would one deal with the emotions? How would you bring these emotions up? Because for me, I just experience tension, and certain feelings, I guess, but there's not really. I've been unable to locate emotions, certainly on my own, because I'm single at the moment. I understand in relationships, those emotions are going to be more easily triggered, right? So we need to be in a position to be aware of the emotions when they come up. But how would one go about accessing those emotions that you talk about?
It's ideal to work on yourself first before bringing it into a partnership, because all kinds of stuff comes up in the partnership which can really cause a lot of chaos. So basically, the way that I've adapted to teach my clients and what I get them doing first and what I get them doing in the program is, number one, just look at our body as a structure, you know, and just understand about the meridian moving in the body. So the first thing, connecting with the body, is very important to start doing regular breathing exercises. So I get the clients doing breathing practices and just starting to move their bodies, but not in the way, you know, when most people exercise, there's a lot of tension in the body. This is about actually starting to open the joints, open the tendons, get a flexible body, because if the body isn't flexible, how can the energy flow? You know, so going on the hips, going on the shoulders, every part of the body is really important to start getting all that to open up. So the first week is just creating this relationship in the body. And then we start to go in and we start to look at emotions. So emotions are energetic vibrations inside of our bodies. And first of all, we start to just understand how we can start to transform those emotions in the body. So finding them in our organs, smiling to them, growing certain types of energy, and also understanding how the organs and the emotions relate to certain areas in the sexual organs as well. Okay. Right. Then, okay, so a very, very important part, and what I've mentioned is the sexual energy needs to rise up, but it needs somewhere to go. And it's a bit like, you know, if you go through the airport and you've got a little kid with you and they want the kid to go through the scanning machine, right? You know, but they want it to go on its own. So the mum goes through first, the kid goes down, and then the mum goes, and the kid like runs along, mommy, you know, and hugs the mummy and goes through the scanning machine on its own, right? And it's a little bit similar because the sexual energy wants to rise up, but also there can be a little bit of a kind of, you know, scary area of blocked emotions for it to go through. But when we've got a lovely, nice, warm heart, full of love, full of literally the energy of the element of fire, it's creating this magnetic field which pulls the sexual energy up. So it's very, very important to have this basis of self-love. And now as the client goes through the process of the course, what we're starting to do is we're starting to open them up energetically. So it's almost like we're lighting this fire inside of them. And as the fire starts to light and starts to glow, they then start magnetizing people. So often people will start the course with no partner. I'm like, don't worry, you don't need to try to find a partner. In fact, I encourage, don't try to find a partner. Work on building this beautiful warm energy in your heart, and then we start bringing it up into our eyes. As they say, the eyes are the doorway to the soul, and connecting from our eyes to other people and starting to create a new kind of a connection, but a really pure-hearted connection. Because the big mistake a lot of guys make is they go, oh, sexual energy, and they come at the woman with this sexual energy, which kind of often leaves the woman going, oh, you're creepy, like that, you know, because women want you reach out to a woman to her heart, you know, not from the sexual energy to her sexual energy. You know, it's not going to really go anywhere fruitful. Whereas when you have this nice energy and you're able to reach into her heart, you give her this feeling of being comfortable, which is just beyond, you know, anything that anyone could manipulate, you know, and she literally just opens up to you. You know, so a very important part of this practice, when we look at the blocked energy, one of the blocked energies is kind of like necessity and urgency for sex, you know, masturbating a lot to release this blocked energy, you know, needing to have sex, needing this and that. Whereas as we go through this evolution of becoming multi-orgasmic, although we have much more sexual energy and much more pleasure, we're much more able to just sit with the energy and be like, you know what, if you want to just sit here and talk to me, let's talk. If you want to have sex, let's have sex, but it's not like I need to ejaculate in order to feel okay by the end of the night, you know? And then once we've got that going, we start looking at how we can tap into the energy meridians, start activating the energy meridians, how we can then start moving the sexual energy through those meridians. We start to go more deeply into getting negative emotions out of our body, you know, and we look at different things, like, for example, talking about sex. Talking about sex is not something that's done that much in our culture. You know, there's not a healthy discussion and debate around sex. It's really something, you know, that we need to talk about. Come on, you wouldn't get a whole group of surfers sitting together going, oh my God, but let's not talk about surfing. It's a taboo or something like that. You know,
yeah.
grab our surfboards and run in the sea. Who needs a lesson or any advice or YouTube videos or whatever? You know, it's quite ridiculous actually how we are. So talking, communicating, not being scared. A lot of men are afraid to say they want something, to ask the woman what they want. There's a fear that, for example, they're going to break up the moment, but this is all coming down to block negative emotions, you know, and that essentially what's happening with all these blocked emotions is the person has to reach so hard for stimulation. And then when they're kind of on the stimulation, they're just running away, being dragged along by the nose, you know, and this is why, I mean, I've spoken to men literally who've been accused of date rape, been in jail for date rape. And some of them are just like, I don't understand what happened. I don't understand what's going on. And because people are not aware about their sexuality, anything can just happen because it's something that's such a foreign force to them. It just takes over, you know? Wow. So we start looking, and then we start looking more about how do we create a connection? How do we get a deep connection with someone? You know, there's a whole science to creating a connection using the heart, using the eyes, using the energy field and so on. And when couples have that connection together, you know, it's going to mean they can be married for 50 years and still having great sex. You know, so many couples, they get bored, they go sexless and so on. But it's just, you know, it's not necessary, you know, and having this connection, ultimately it starts with ourselves. And when we're connected with ourselves, it's just something very, very incredible, you know, and then we move on with finding connection just with other people in general. And for example, if you're a boss, you're working somewhere, you've got your employees, if you can connect in a pure-hearted, loving way to your employees, it's going to like double their productivity, you know, because they are going to feel that, and it's going to make a big difference. You know, and then we look at sexual techniques, because of course it's important. If anyone's going through the sexual transformation, they can't just go back to having sex as they did before, you know. And especially women, for example, we can find a problem that we get with the guy has this unbalanced sexual energy. He's like, you know, sometimes it can end up almost feeling, you know, that like you're violated, or the sex is quite unpleasant, and he might not even be aware of it. And I explain the techniques, how you can then take control and get him onto your level, so you can then start having the lovemaking you want. And the same thing with males. And specifically, I mean, the vagina is very fascinating because it's inside the body. You know, the penis is there on the outside, much easier to see. But when we look at going into, when we look at actually going inside the vagina, there are these pressure points, these energy points. And when these start being activated in the woman, it literally releases like so much blocked emotions that she has, you know. And when so many guys will complain, oh, the woman's moody, she doesn't treat me good, she's this, she's that, you know. If you can massage and touch her vagina correctly, you can eliminate that stuff. You know, this is blocked energy, this is traumas inside of her body, but any guy can consciously open those up and release them so that the woman gets more pleasure, and she just has all this tension disappear. And it's the same thing. The technique with the man is a little bit different, but a woman can also unblock her partner's sexual energy and get him, you know, lasting as long as he wants, and just much, much more calm and relaxed.
Okay, cool. And I'd love to talk a little bit more on that, but I just want to go back to what we were talking about for men in terms of like accessing their heart energy, because this is really interesting for me, because I realized about 2 years ago, maybe a little more, I realized that I had shame around feeling love for people, and specifically women. Like, I found it was easier for me to be kind of loving with men in terms of like appreciating men and being more open. And I definitely found myself being more closed around women. Now, I had a lot of memories come up around school time when I felt attraction for a woman, and then I'd express that, and I would be rejected and maybe being laughed at by the other kids. And that, I think, certainly played a part in me feeling very uncomfortable in terms of not just expressing my appreciation for women, but even feeling it until I had permission to. Now, I've noticed a little shift with me in just the last few months where I do feel a little more connected to myself. And in that, when let's just say I'm at a shop and there's a woman behind the till, I feel like I get to this point of I can really appreciate her and just see the beauty in her. And whereas before, I never would have allowed myself to feel that because I felt in some way that I was intruding on her. Like it wasn't fair for me. That feeling of love and appreciation for another woman was actually too much. And so I would hold that back. So am I heading in the right direction here? Because I feel for a lot of men like appreciation seems like a good doorway into more love, because appreciation just seems like we're not so the issue with the way a lot of men approach women is that they're so concerned about themselves and how they're going to be rejected and the pain that's going to arise and the shame, that they're not really able to witness the woman in front of them and appreciate them for who they are. But as we're able to see her beauty, it just feels like, when I feel into it, it feels like that's more of a heart-based energy that's sort of coming up and out. Would you agree with what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And you're really touching on what I was talking about. And this is absolutely essential for men to know. And I tell them, because some clients I speak to, and this is just absolutely terrible, but they may have never had a girlfriend in their life and be in their 30s. You'll generally find pretty much in every case that there's like a lot of porn use going on. Some of them may be using prostitutes as well. So the sexual energy and the energy of love is really disconnected, and they can't think about approaching a woman without there being something sexual behind it. So it's absolutely essential to be able to approach women in a pure-hearted way. And of course, this is one of the huge problems we have in our culture, because you see that the men are, that the men are essentially, if you look at male dating coaches, they're telling guys, okay, you've got to meet her by the third time. If she's not as sexual, you just forget it, so on this kind of really needy, desperate thing to get her into bed the first few times. According to the female energy, well, that's not a very pleasant energy. So probably they are going to get rejected, or maybe they're going to have a couple of flings that may even be like a little bit non-consensual and sort of forceful or whatever, but it doesn't really kind of like go anywhere. So what you're describing, and this is really like how to heal the heart and how to reconnect the sexual energy, is to really just like open up your heart, start smiling to your heart, growing that love there and centering there. And when you center there, what it means is that exactly that sexual energy is rising up into your heart. And then really, and the more that you really like focus on connecting with people in a pure-hearted way, the more you're going to get the results from this.
And the beauty of it is it can't be faked, because you'll get dating coaches that will teach men how to say the right things and almost present themselves in a way that gets a woman to like them, which is just needy in itself and it's all head-based egotistical behavior, right? But you can't fake love. It's you see it in the eyes of people. It's an energy that comes out of them, and it just can't be faked. And so from my experience, we can only get there by seeing all the ways in which we have shame around feeling love. So I guess it's not just shame around our sexuality, which there's a lot of, but it's a shame around love and feeling and expressing love. The idea of feeling love for a partner within the first minute of meeting them, or someone who you're attracted to within a minute, is like, no, I'm going to hold back my love until I know for sure that it's safe to give it, and then I fear less about losing the love, because we've learned that somehow when we feel love, it can be taken away from us, right?
Well, the thing is, love is not a quantifiable thing, and all love is based on self-love. So when you've got a healthy supply of self-love within your body, within yourself, then it's very easy for you to, you build up so much self-love, it fills your heart, it fills your body, and then it spreads out into your aura. So it's not about giving what you're lacking, because if you're lacking self-love and you give, it's always going to end up going wrong. Whereas if you have this healthy basis of self-love, which is obviously what these people are essentially lacking, they're lacking self-love, and that's why they're attracted to this kind of manipulative coaching techniques. Then basically, you're just gonna go from mistake to mistake to mistake, and all it's going to do is just essentially compound the problem that already exists. Yeah, so it's absolutely essential. I mean, I spent a whole week in my course talking about nurturing self-love, because it's important to get that sexual energy rising up, and it's very important to relate to other people from a place of self-love as well.
Got it. And you can imagine a society where everyone's feeling self-love, and there wouldn't be an issue with approaching someone on the street, right? If a man was really feeling his love for a woman and was able to approach from that place of just pure appreciation, would you agree then that would mean there would be less shame around men approaching women?
I mean, I think just people approaching each other, full stop. I think it's between, I think it's just between people that there's a fear of love. And there is, I mean, to some extent, there's fear for men approaching women. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's feeling like, people just don't know how to approach, I mean, I've had one guy recently approach me on various of my social medias, asking me to go on a drink with him, telling me, how great sex we're going to have. And I'm just like, okay, dude, you know what I mean? Yeah. I'm getting him actually kind of in trouble with LinkedIn, because he's then asking my assistant to go on a date with him as well. And you just bless him. I mean, he's like a prime candidate to benefit from my course, but, he's not ready yet to start looking at what is going on, I think just, pure-hearted, intelligent place where we're very relaxed and comfortable with ourselves, and when we relate to others in that way, it's just so much more pleasant, Yeah.
Okay, great. Let's go back to what we're talking about women then, because obviously there's a lot more women have a lot more have access to a lot more pleasure than I believe most women realize. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. People talk about women having an orgasm. I mean, I just think an orgasm is like a massive letdown. This is like, we are multi-orgasmic. Everyone is multi-orgasmic, but specifically, women are very multi-orgasmic. And, for example, like the conventional sex coach will tell you, oh, find her clitoris and touch her clitoris. I mean, it's just missing out, 98% of the pleasure that a woman can have. It's a very kind of like one-dimensional sexual experience. And the big problem is women do not know their own bodies. They don't understand their own pleasure, and it's hard because the sexual organ's there inside, and it's not even that easy to get in there with your own fingers and to basically, touch it and feel those different pleasure spots. I mean, I didn't learn until I started using a jade egg in the Taoist practice and learning how to move this egg gently with the muscles of my vagina inside, that I started to learn that, the different pleasure spots, the different types of pleasure, I could feel the different types of orgasm. But then even on the outside of the vagina, there's every part of the vagina is very exquisitely, pleasurable. Every part of the whole body is very pleasurable. And women were just kind of reduced to these kind of clitorises and single orgasms. And it's just a bit of a, it's just a sorry, sad situation, and some women, they just can't even have orgasms at all. And I mean, when I think, and obviously I went through a number of years of sex life with no idea, about any of this pleasure or orgasms that I was capable of, until I discovered the Taoist practices and I discovered about the jade egg. And it was a complete, when I discovered it, it wasn't just about getting more fun in bed. It was literally like my whole life changed, my whole life transformed, my whole self woke up, and we go around through life seeing all these kind of, shut down women, miserable women, sick women, not to say that there aren't men suffering as well, but specifically, women have a very bad reputation in some ways, and some of it I can understand, but it just comes down to these women. They're just like so sexually shut down, and it just stops us from, accessing our power. It stops us from accessing our creativity, because ultimately our sexual organs, they are the power generators that basically can fuel us through life, both as men and as women. But it's women that you see, because when the female sexual energy blocks up, it tends to just shut down not feel anything.
Mm.
Some women will find they're then getting nymphomania, right, where they're wanting to have a lot of sex, but it generally tends to just be a shutdown. Whereas with the man, because the sexual energy is more volatile, hence why you get the more higher rates of crime in men, in unbalanced men, the energy is trying to rise up, and that's why men will come too quickly and have premature ejaculation, whereas women will not have an orgasm.
Okay, let's say you're a guy and you, after listening to this podcast or watching this podcast, maybe you realize that he realizes his girlfriend might be shut down in certain areas of her pussy and he wants to help her access more pleasure. How would he go about bringing the subject up without hurting her, without bringing up shaming her? Because this is obviously a really delicate subject, right? It's such a sensitive area of a woman's body. It needs to be approached in a way, in a particular way. How would you recommend that?
So first of all, I would just say that it doesn't need to be verbally mentioned to her, okay? Because if the guy works on himself and balances his own sexual energy, will have a knock-on effect on his partner. And there's ultimately going to be something going on with him as well within that energy system. So for example, I've coached men and they've learned how to work on their own energy and come back and be like, wow, I've been with my wife for 25 years and she's just had her first orgasm, and that's not even specifically just down to a technique I taught. It's to do with the change inside of his own energy. So yeah, I would say it's like the same. For example, if your guy has premature ejaculation, it's not necessarily a good thing to say to him, you have premature ejaculation, you need to see a therapist. It may just back him into a corner and cause him to just have like a lot of more anxiety, but there's very simple ways of getting rid of it. I mean, I had a partner when I first met him, he had very bad premature ejaculation. Later, I never mentioned it. Later, he told me he'd had it his entire life. After having sex a few times, I realized, okay, there's the problem. I did use the technique on him, slowed him down, got him breathing. And then he was just going, hang on, what's going on? Why am I lasting so long with you? Why can we have sex for so long? And I just said, oh, you're more relaxed now, And I never said to him, oh, I've never did mention that word to him. You have premature ejaculation, because obviously it's like a really big taboo. It could really upset them. If they're having that happen again and again, many guys, they're not aware of what the problem is. Same as many women, they may not kind of be aware. They may be kind of aware something's going wrong, but if you actually say it to them, they might find it quite distressing and confusing, just very, very confusing, So I would just say, if you want to help something with your partner, work on yourself. And when you work on yourself, you balance your own sexual energy. And of course, I teach these techniques in the course, but before they learn these techniques, there's a certain amount of self-work they need to do on themselves, because if they go into those techniques with the same energy that they had before, those techniques aren't going to work. They need to go in, balance their own energy, slow themselves down, get their energy to connect with her, and then the techniques will work, and then they will be able to unblock her energy.
Sure. I get what you're saying about the man's energy affecting hers, but let's say if you're a woman and you're single, and maybe you are used to more of a clitoris stimulation as a way of experiencing self-pleasure, right? So what would you recommend to a woman in that situation?
So first of all, when it comes to self-pleasure, listen, you put your hand down there and your clitoris is right there by your hand. God made it that way. Nature made it that way. The clitoris is there for us, to touch on ourselves, right? Now, if she's interested in discovering more about her pleasure, using the technique, the Taoist technique of jade egg. So that's not just getting a jade egg and putting it in your vagina. It's like a specific Taoist technique where you're using healing sounds and meditating with certain parts of your vagina. It's an amazing technique to do it, combined with the Taoist self-massage. And definitely before doing that, it is good to get in there, do the Taoist alchemy practices, so learning how to transform your negative emotions and circulate your energy, because otherwise you can cause energy blocks by doing that.
Okay. So get the course basically is what you recommend for people who really want to, because it's not something that they're going to be able to achieve in just a few self-pleasuring experiences, right? There's obviously a systematic process that needs that people need to go through in order to get to this point of really being able to experience expanded states of pleasure?
I think so, if you're wanting to get somewhere with it, yeah. And for example, I mean, I've heard of people kind of learning yoni massage techniques, for example, online. And I definitely, you know, on YouTube or something, and I definitely would not recommend doing something like that, because you know, because you can just end up actually like re-traumatizing her basically, and actually causing her even more traumas, you know. So obviously it's not to say, you know, don't explore or whatever, you know, anything, especially if you're doing it gently. But if you're trying to use specific tantric massage techniques, but you haven't done that work on yourself to do it, I would say it's not a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
In general, is it more of a challenge to get men to experience these multiple orgasms than women, like to separate orgasm from ejaculation?
I mean, the advantage men have is they have a huge amount of energy that is just waiting to move up there. So once you get that energy moving, there's a lot of energy, you know. So if you imagine a strong energy that's blocked compared to an energy that isn't really flowing, which is often what you find in women, it actually can be easier for men to learn how to have multiple orgasms than women. But then, you know, it's just gonna depend, you know, on the individual. And by the way, this men having multiple orgasms, it doesn't mean repeat ejaculations. It means literally the body going into an orgasmic state, which does not involve ejaculation. Yeah. So
I was a bit skeptical of it, you know, until to people listening, I had 2 sessions with you in person, bodywork sessions. And the first one was when it was just me. And yeah, I was totally skeptical about all of this. And you opened up certain energy pathways in my body through the massage. And I remember feeling the kind of full body kind of shaking that I hadn't experienced before. And I also noticed that carried on for quite a few weeks after our session together. So it really did open up a whole new world for me.
Yeah, so it unblocked the energy. And like I said, it's pretty easy to, you know, especially if the man hasn't ejaculated for a few days or a week, if he can relax and breathe properly, it's pretty easy to give him a multiple orgasm if you know what you're doing, of course, you know, or for him to learn how to do it as well. But I think the main number one thing where perhaps men are going wrong is they want to avoid this emotional thing and go at it from like a macho kind of perspective. But you know, having a good relationship with your emotions is a manly thing to do, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, it's takes courage, right?
Sorry?
Takes courage.
Big time. It takes a lot of courage.
It does.
Yeah. And because men are raised to repress their emotions and not to be in touch with their emotions. So for sure, it's a tough thing for guys to start doing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're coming up to the hour mark now. So is there anything you'd like to end on? And also, can you let our listeners, viewers, know how they can find you and maybe what offerings you've got at the moment?
Absolutely. So I have got my course, which is a 3-month course. It's the Multi-Orgasmic Toolkit, and that can be either done on its own as a standalone, or you can do it as part of a coaching package where I'm guiding you through the process of it. And in terms of if you're looking more at learning about sex, if you're a man and you're looking more about sexual techniques to learn with women, I have another course. It's called From Lover to Super Lover. Again, it teaches you how to balance your own energy, come into the connection with your beloved, and start using these sexual techniques as well. So those are a couple of options there. And perhaps we can give them a link to me so that they can.
Okay. Yeah, we can do that at the bottom of the YouTube video.
Yeah.
Cool. It's definitely been a challenge for me. I notice every time I talk about anything sexual, knowing that this is getting put out there, I definitely had that fear response come up in me, but it does definitely, I feel more relaxed about it than I did last time we had a conversation. So I can see there's a lot of growth for me in terms of reducing my sexual shame. And I totally agree with you. I mean, it's crazy that there is so much shame caught up in such a natural process that none of us would be here without. It's coming at us from every angle, and at the same time it's such a taboo subject, it just doesn't really make sense. So this has been a great help for me to learn to be able to just talk about it and not have to worry too much about
Yeah.
about the embarrassment, you know.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and that's right. You know, there's so much, people are so embarrassed about talking about sexual things, but there's actually nothing embarrassing about it. So yeah.
Sure. And as we become more free and open to talk about it, is that us releasing the shame, and therefore we are going to experience better sex. So how we interact with sex outside of the bedroom is going to be having an effect on how we interact with it inside the bedroom. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah, so not putting awkward seedy comments, but actually, you know, or saying, you know, uncomfortable things, but really having proper conversations around sexuality and emotions. And that's really a very important part of breaking through all of this. Absolutely.
Lovely. Cool.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks for that, Jade. It's been great. I've enjoyed it. And yeah, we'll have to do this again soon.
I've enjoyed that too.
Cool.